Hi and welcome to the Resources Roadhouse. I'm Wally Graham. I'm at the RIU Sydney Resources Roundup and I'm just having a chat with Shaun Scott from Noble Helium. Now, Shaun, welcome to the Roadhouse.
Thank you.
Now, before we came on air, you were explaining to me why Tanzania, where you're based, is such a good place to be finding helium, which you have.
Yeah, it's a really unique geology for helium, and as I was saying, the helium's created through the radioactive decay of uraniums and thoriums in the crust. Uranium has a 4 billion year half-life, so you need crust that's old. So you've had a chance for it to decay and build up that inventory, which we have in the Tanzanian craton that sits right in the middle of Tanzania. But what's unique about Tanzania is that it's then caught up in the East African rift system. So there's been wrenching and upthrusting and heating, which has then liberated all of that helium inventory into the surrounding geology, which is young neogene sandstone reservoirs, which are perfect for producing, because there's a couple of things you need to be successful. Obviously helium, which we've got, and we found 2.5% helium in our drilling, but importantly as well, you need it in a reservoir that's going to flow to get commercial flow. Much the same as you would with any other oil and gas project. So we've got those components here.
All right, okay, just sticking with the geology lesson at the moment. So is it because it's such Africa's quite an ancient sort of geology? You mentioned then there's a new geology because of the sandstone, but
Yep.
Is that sort of like a mixture of the two?
Yeah, I think it's just a unique setting in that you're exactly right. You've got this old crust that's in the middle, but then and there's lots of places where they find high helium concentrations, but the problem typically is that it's still stuck in those old rocks that don't have the potential to give you commercial flow rates. Whereas here, because of that rifting and the other tectonic activity that's gone on, and the geologists will tell you it's happening recently, which means in the last sort of billion years or so, that's then liberated that out of this old tight hard rock and allowed it to migrate into sandstones which have porosity and permeability, and we can flow it and commercially flow it.
All right, so thank you for the lesson. Appreciate that. So the Helium Reserve, or I'm saying reserve, I don't know if that's the correct word to use, but the helium you've found, what have you got there?
Yeah, so at the moment we're about to go back in the middle of this year when the conditions allow. So you have a defined wet and dry season in Tanzania. So we're just finishing the wet season now. So once access is enabled again, we'll go back. And what we want to do is we found a gas cap at the top of the first well we drilled. It's a structure that's about 9 kilometres by 4 kilometres, 20 odd metres thick, and we want to go and flow test that. And then with that data, and hopefully we're successful at flow testing that, we're talking to potential offtake parties, and then we'll sort of try and bring those two things together by the end of the year. They'll fund the downstream capital to separate and liquefy the helium and then buy it from us there. We'll obviously do the work to extract it out of the ground, drill the wells, etc. All
right, so so looking ahead, what do we sort of anticipate hearing in the next, the rest of the year?
Yeah, so as I say, probably the big next step's going to be mobilising the equipment to site to do the test drilling there, which will, August kind of time frame, I'd say, is probably reasonable. And flowing gas to surface and measuring it, that'll be a big step for us. And then, as I say, the next part of it will be negotiating with a potential off-taker, getting a deal together and getting down that path towards monetisation, which, while it's all great to find it, we need to turn it into money to make it valuable.
Yeah, and the helium, it's more than just blowing up balloons, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, helium's a critical industrial gas. It's used in a range of things: MRI machines, fibre optic cables, specialty welding. But the real big growth driver recently is semiconductor manufacturing. And what's unique about helium is that it's multiple properties of helium that are important in a lot of these processes, which makes it incredibly hard to substitute for something synthetic. So with semiconductors, for example, it has very high ionisation capabilities, it's inert, low freezing point, etc. But what that means, though, is that without helium, they can't operate. So it's a critical element of what they do. And it's a relatively small part of their cost base, but because it's so important, it's a very high value commodity because it's quite rare.
All right. Okay. Oh, well, thanks. This has been quite a fascinating little stop for me because, I mean, as I was saying before, stuff with oil and gas sort of, they're right out of my remit, and it's always good for me to learn what's going on.
Probably the critical bit of information, I think, when you're talking about oil and gas, because it's a gas, and so the way you find it, the costs to find it are the same. The big difference here, though, is that for every molecule of gas you sell, you get about $12 Aussie at the moment. That's the gas cap that exists in Australia. For every molecule of helium that I sell, I get $692. But my costs are fundamentally the same.
Yeah.
So it's a very compelling economic.
Argument.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
and part of the reason why we're chasing it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, keep in touch. I'd like to follow this story, Shaun, and make sure that that we can bring it to the folk at the Roadhouse, and so that we can learn more.
All right, no problems. Nice talking to you.